Dopamine is an important neurotransmitter. It plays a very crucial role in how our brain interacts with the world in terms of pleasure and reward. When we think of things like feedback loops, or that great feeling we have, say when we accomplish a goal, or maybe we're enjoying a donut or some junk food, things of that nature, dopamine is the neurotransmitter that is released that gives us that pleasurable feeling. Now, in and of itself, having that release and that reward pathway is incredibly important because it causes us to want to seek out that reward yet again, similar to Pavlovian conditioning. Dr. Pavlov back in the day would ring a bell and the dogs would come and eat. So they associated the bell ringing with them eating. Then eventually he would ring the bell and wouldn't even have to feed them, but they would start salivating and believe that they were about to eat. Dopamine works in the same way. When we go through and complete activities or we engage in some type of behavior or enjoy something in our life that gets that dopamine release, well, our brain is conditioned to want to chase that good feeling yet again. In and of itself, it just is. It's neutral. Doesn't necessarily have to be good or bad. However, what has happened, especially recently, is that it's become easier and easier to get those dopamine hits. And when those dopamine hits come easier and easier, well, they start to lose their potency. And so we begin to chase that dopamine hit. And the easiest dopamine hits seem to come initially from things that aren't necessarily the best for us. A great example of something that's really not that great for us, but brings a tremendous dopamine hit would be something like drugs. Heroin, for example, overloads our dopamine receptors in such a way that once you've done it, you're never going to feel the same level of happiness ever again in your life. And this is where heroin addicts come from, where addiction comes into play. Because they're never going to be able to feel that same level of pleasure and joy, well, they're chasing that high in any way that they possibly can to try to get as close as possible. And it becomes the end-all be-all. That's what addiction is. It takes over your life. On a less severe note, you have things like pornography. Now, porn addiction is a very real thing. Again, addiction is where it takes over your life and it begins to commandeer and steer what it is that you do for your activities, how you spend your time, how you spend your money. And, choking the chicken, spanking the monkey, jerking it, cranking it, whatever you want to call it. Masturbation's been around really since as long as the humans have existed. That feeling of chasing that orgasm, that being able to feel that happiness, right? Dudes have been doing it forever. Chicks too. That's the way the world works. However, in itself, it's not necessarily a bad activity. When it begins to override into other things, that's where it becomes a problem. And what you'll find is that porn addicts are constantly looking for that new stimulus. Pornography is shot and produced in such a way that it again triggers those dopamine hits, that dopamine receptor, but it's never quite as good as the last time you saw it. And so you're constantly looking for more extreme pornography. You're looking for different types of stimulus, a different hit, a different way of experiencing that same joy and pleasure. And if you're unaware, you become addicted, constantly chasing it. Same thing with social media. Again, in moderation, fantastic. It can be a useful tool. Odds are you're probably watching this on an app that we're talking about, like YouTube or Instagram, things of that nature. Specifically though, social media apps are designed in a way that they want to maximize your screen time. They want to maximize the amount of time that you spend in the app. Now, if you're using it for productive purposes, okay, cool, good on you, great stuff. Watching this video, for example, you're learning things about the world, you're learning about life. That in and of itself, that's a great thing. However, if all you're doing is you're scrolling, you're laughing, watching memes, it's not quite as productive. Final example, let's talk junk food. How many of you like to eat donuts or ice cream, drink soda, those sugary treats that we have in our life? Candy all the time, right? So, dopamine hit, that dopamine isn't just going through activities. That's not just from social media. That's not just from, drugs per se. Junk food itself is a drug. It has a drug-like response. You become addicted to the sugar. When they talk about sugar addiction, they're really talking about some of that dopamine hit, that receptor that gets pinged every time you grab one of those red vines or you scarf down a frosted donut or you pound a pint of gelato, whatever it might be. Again, in moderation, a little bit of ice cream, not that bad for you. But when you become addicted to it, when you're constantly chasing that, the feel-good foods, right? The foods that make you feel good inside. Oh, it's so delicious. Never mind the fact that it's 5,374 calories and, I only really need like 2,000 today. It's so good. I just got to eat it all. I can't stop. Well, you combine that with a little bit of scarcity mentality of, I don't know when I'll be able to eat this ever again. And then all of a sudden, you start to gain a little weight. Society has made it super easy for us to get those cheap dopamine hits. But the problem with the cheap hits is that they have expensive results. You don't pay it up front, but you pay it down the line tenfold. Those donuts that you're eating, you don't pay for it right away. I mean, you might shit your pants a little bit, but over time, that's where you pay for it. You pay for it 10 months, 10 years down the line when you've continued on that cycle of eating the donut to get the dopamine hit, and now all of a sudden, you're fucking fat. That cheap hit of being able to log on to pick a website online, get some OnlyFans going, it's only $5, get a little crank, and woo, we're off to the races. Everything feels good. It's cheap up front, but it becomes expensive when you start wanting to message and you start paying for the messages, when you start paying for more exclusive stuff, you start paying higher tickets. And all of a sudden, all your free money is going towards some dude who's pretending to be a chick online. Oops, sorry. That's the way the world works. So when we talk about being aware, be aware of what it is that's giving you those dopamine hits, and now you get to take control. Now you get to decide, okay, cool, I'll take a little dopamine hit here, but I'm cutting it off. Because the key to all of this, the key to controlling your dopamine is discipline. Having discipline in your life, discipline in your habits, discipline in everything you spend your time, your money, your energy on. And as you grow with that discipline, you now have better control over yourself because you can rewire what is giving you those dopamine hits. And as you start to rewire your dopamine receptors and what gives you those responses, you now again have that control over your life. You can diversify. You get to decide what it is that's going to make you happy. Because at the end of it, a true man of the future and next generation gentleman is one who decides what it is that he wants to become, what it is that he wants to achieve, what it is that's going to make him happy and fulfilled in his life. And if you pick the right things, you pick the smart things that stack into one another, that get you that much closer to your true ideal self, fantastic. You're going to get even stronger dopamine hits in the future when you get to accomplish it. Now, the key to all this is awareness. By watching this video, you are now that much more aware of how the world might be chasing after your dopamine. They want to grab your dopamine. They want to control when you get that dopamine dose, when those receptors get pinged, when you get to enjoy things. And if you liked this video, join us at nextgengentleman.com. Start changing your life today.